The people who make avoidance crazy without saying a word do it by understanding one simple principle. They understand that the middle does not exist. All right, check out this Venn diagram. You've got three circles. You've got closeness, independence, and consistency. Now, most people want it all with an avoidant. They want that middle. They want that close relationship, the ability to be independent, and the ability to be consistent. The reality, though, is that with an avoidant, you can only ever have two at a time. So let's play a game. I'm going to pick at random two of these circles and show you what typically happens in that type of a relationship. So let's start first with the closeness circle and the consistency circle, but obviously there will be no independence here. All right, so closeness, what does that mean? Well, it basically just means there's a constant emotional connection. You're texting every day, you're checking in, you're sharing details, you're planning the future together. It's that warm, reassuring rhythm that says we're good. Consistency just means that the relationship is going to feel stable. The other person shows up when they say they will. You know what to expect. There are no sudden disappearances, no mixed signals, no whiplash. Now, it sounds kind of ideal, right? Except there's a problem. We've chosen two circles, which means we're missing arguably the most important one, independence. So when you combine closeness and consistency with an avoidant, it usually kills their oxygen. They start to feel like they're losing themselves, like every moment of reassurance costs them a piece of freedom. And then that's when the pullback begins. They'll invent space where there doesn't need to be any. Suddenly they're just busy. Suddenly they just need to focus on work. They don't know what's wrong. They just need time. What's really happening here is that this combination triggers their deepest fear. Dependence. So in essence, what you get is a relationship that feels stable and connected, but the avoidant feels smothered and eventually runs. So that kind of blows. Maybe let's try another combo. Let's try closeness and independence this time, but remove consistency. All right, so I already explained what happens in the closeness circle, so no need to explain that again. The independence circle is the virgin ground for us. So independence basically means both people in the relationship can breathe. There's space to pursue hobbies. There's space to see friends and not feel guilty about it. You don't have to text every hour to feel safe. You trust that the connection still exists, even in silence. So if you remember back with our very first pairing, I made this comment about how closeness and consistency usually kills avoidance oxygen. Well, that oxygen is really independence because it's what keeps attraction alive. And for an avoidant, that oxygen is non-negotiable. But the whole premise of this video is based on a catch. When you mix independence with closeness and remove consistency, what you get is chaos disguised as chemistry. One moment, there's deep talks and emotional intimacy. The next, it's distance and uncertainty. This is the kind of relationship that feels intoxicating, but is completely unstable. Both people think they're giving each other space, but really, they're just testing to see how far they can drift before it eventually breaks. And for someone who's already prone to anxiousness in a relationship, this combo is complete torture because every high feels earned and every low is going to feel like a punishment. It's the emotional slot machine dynamic. Pull the lever enough times and maybe you'll get that hit of closeness again. Okay, so clearly these two circles are not the foundation for a great relationship. Maybe our last combo will be independence plus consistency and no closeness. All right, I've already explained what all three circles represent, so I'm not going to cover that anymore. Instead, I'll just explain the dynamic of this relationship for you. With this combo, you have stability and space. Now, on the outside, it kind of looks healthy. You have two adults with boundaries, no drama, but underneath, it's emotionally sterile. There's reliability, but no spark. There's understanding, but no real intimacy. It's kind of like being teammates instead of lovers. Ironically, this is the stage where most avoidants feel safest, but also the least alive. Because without closeness, consistency just becomes repetition, and independence just turns into isolation. Here's the point. You can never have all three of these circles at once with an avoidant. The true middle, that magical overlap in the Venn diagram, it doesn't exist. Trying to force all three is always what keeps everyone stuck and unhappy. So if that's the case, which two circles actually work the best? And which combos secretly make them spiral the most? Well, As you're going to find out, the answer is a bit complicated. But with the help of our weekly group coaching here, Kristen learned exactly what to do. And now she's married to her avoidant. And I think that's the part most people miss. You don't have to do this alone. Inside the reconnection room, me and my team of coaches walk you through every stage of this process. We host live sessions almost every day where you can ask your questions to us directly, get real feedback, and start applying what actually works, not the surface level stuff you're seeing online. You can gain immediate access to the reconnection room for a massive 50% discount for just a one-time payment of $97 by simply clicking the link in the description below. All right. So which relationship circle combination works best? Well, let's play another game. I'm going to take you through our 3 options and we're going to figure that out. We're going to play this game with a couple of assumptions though. You're going to play the role of someone who isn't fully anxious, preoccupied, but you're really leaning towards it. You're prone to jealousy and worry you're going to be left. Your partner, well, they're a dismissive avoidant. Not really too much to add there. All right, let's have you jump into option number 1. This is always the strong closeness and consistency circle combination, of course. There's no independence circle going to be present. Now, what it feels like for you is stable, connected, and predictable. What it's going to feel like for them is pure suffocation. They'll feel like they can't breathe. The result is they're going to run. All right, so what's the verdict here? Well, it's great for you at the start because it feeds your need for reassurance, but it's pretty much a nightmare for them. And since they'll bolt the second they feel trapped, it's not sustainable for either of you. This combo burns bright, burns fast, and ends early. So let's move on to option 2. Why do I feel like a game show host? All right, we're going to choose the independence circle and the consistency circle, but as a result, we will get no closeness. All right, so what this is going to feel like for you is safe, predictable, but kind of flat, like your roommates. For them, this is often a relationship that is a nightmare that they don't want to admit. Now, on paper, it's what they claim to want. They get the space, they get the stability, but there's no closeness, and they eventually will feel invisible and irrelevant. So the result is they start chasing you for intimacy because the lack of closeness gnaws at them, but only for a time. The verdict here is this is the most strategic for long-term leverage. It doesn't drive them crazy per se in the short term, but what it will do is quietly flip the power dynamic. All right, let's move on to our 3rd option. This is where we have the closeness circle and the independence circle, but we have no consistency. For you, there are going to be amazing highs and really, really awful lows. You're going to get closeness when they want it, but there's no promises it's going to last. For them, it's going to feel really, really electrifying, but really, really unstable. It's going to secretly kind of unnerve them that you can tolerate inconsistency better than they can. The result is they're often going to spiral because normally they control the push-pull. If you're the calm in that chaos, it feels like you're always one step ahead, and that's going to freak them out. The big verdict? Well, this is the combo that makes them the most crazy. You're proving you can dance in the instability without demanding guarantees. A couple of points I want to make here, though. Technically speaking, there are 2 combinations that can make an avoidant crazy. So which is best? Well, if your goal is to make them spiral fast, then option 3, the closeness and independence circle, will probably work. And if your goal is to flip the dynamic long term, start with option 2, the independence and consistency combo. But there's a big part of this that I really haven't spoken to yet. You may not know it, but I originally came up with this whole idea on a TikTok video in this video right here. I want you to take a look at that top comment. Is it really a relationship if you don't have all 3 circles? And this person, T-E-P, whatever your real name is absolutely correct. You know, over the years, throughout this YouTube channel, I've been remarkably consistent in my advice for what works to get an avoidant to come back. You need to let go because if you aren't able to, you end up in a relationship that makes you feel like you're going crazy. You're close one week and then distant the next. You're guessing, overanalyzing, waiting for the scraps of affection. And the worst part is you start confusing anxiety for love. That's what happens when you try to earn connection instead of living it. You orbit around their moods, their timing, their comfort until you kind of forget that you have needs too. But if you let go, if you refuse to play this 2-circle stupid game to begin with, that's when interesting things begin to happen. And for that, I'd like to tell you a story. All right, I'm going to do a total cop-out here, and I'm going to play a clip from one of my most popular YouTube videos. And I know, I got the year of Into the Wild wrong, but it's a story that matters more than anything. Have you ever heard of Into the Wild? It's a non-fiction book written by John Krakauer in 1966 that tells the true story of Christopher McCandless, a man from a wealthy family who graduates from college, gives away his savings, and embarks on a journey across America. His ultimate goal? Make it to Alaska and live off the land. McCandless is probably the perfect shining example of a dismissive avoidant. Throughout his journey, he constantly seeks isolation, shuns close relationships. He meets Ronald Franz, an elderly man who becomes close to McCandless and actually offers to adopt him. Now, Franz is deeply affected by their bond and suggests the adoption in hopes of providing McCandless with a family. However, McCandless politely declines the offer, staying true to his quest for independence and his desire to live a solitary life in the wilderness. He meets a girl named Tracy who falls in love with him. She's a teenager living in the Slab City community in California where McCandless stays for a while. Despite her feelings for him, McCandless does not reciprocate in any romantic way. And this is really like a consistent theme throughout the book. McCandless meets these people willing to reach out, willing to connect, to get close. And while he's never rude to them, he always prefers the isolation. The whole story basically culminates when he makes it to Alaska. He crosses the frozen river, goes deep into the wild, and is completely isolated from civilization. He lives there for months, surviving by foraging for edible roots and berries, shooting various game, including a moose. He even keeps a journal. The next spring, McCandless tries to return home, but when he gets to the river, it's overflowing with rain and melting snow. McCandless is forced to go back to the base camp where he ultimately passes away. When his body is eventually found, a single journal entry is also found. Happiness only real when shared. All right, you clicked on this video because you want to make avoidance crazy for you without saying a word. And that's exactly what the story of Chris McCandless teaches us. It wasn't someone chasing him that made him realize the value of connection. It was simply isolation. McCandless, he spends all these years running from people, from expectation, from attachment itself. He thinks that freedom is found in total independence, in cutting off everything that ties him down. But when he really got what he wanted, complete solitude, he realized that it always comes with a price. Happiness is only real when shared. That one line captures the entire paradox of the avoidant mindset. They think safety lives in distance until the silence gets too loud. They think connection is the threat until it's gone. And that's why your ability to let go is the most powerful thing that you can do. Because when you stop chasing, you're not punishing them. You're showing them what they can't manufacture on their own. The peace of genuine connection without pressure. That's what makes the avoidant crazy. Not words, not tactics, but your ability to live what they secretly crave. Closeness that doesn't chase. Of course, that's way easier said than done. I always tend to think the people who leave comments on my videos, who basically crucify the people who want avoidance back after being rejected, don't quite understand their predicament. They don't realize that the people who want avoidance back aren't really just chasing a person. They're chasing closure. They're chasing this version of themselves that existed before this confusion set in. When you've invested that much time, that much hope, that much emotion, your brain refuses to believe it was all for nothing. That's the sunk cost fallacy in action. It's not weakness, it's just simply wiring. The mind clings to unfinished stories. That's how it works. And maybe that's the real test. It's not about getting the avoidant back. It's about seeing if you can love someone without abandoning yourself again. Look, when you stop fighting for the middle that doesn't exist, you stop orbiting them. You start coming home to yourself. That's almost always the moment that avoidants notice. That's when they go crazy. But by then, you're usually too grounded to care.